On a typical school day, Haruka sits alone at his desk, fully embracing his role as the class loner. It's not like it bothers him, he actually prefers it this way. The alternative, socializing with his classmates, a thought that makes his skin crawl. The room is a minefield of cliques. The delinquents, the popular girls, the gym bros, and then the rest completely irrelevant. Haruka doesn't fit in with any of them, and he's more than happy about it. More time to focus on his books, less time dealing with people. But today, his peaceful reading session is rudely interrupted by something unexpected. A bright light flares up beneath him. It's a summoning circle, slowly materializing beneath the classroom. For a split second, Haruka feels a thrill. This could be the start of an Isekai adventure. Then dread kicks in. Anyone who's read enough Isekai knows what that means. He's about to get royally screwed. No way is he getting dragged into some fantasy mess. So, he bolts. He rushes to the door, but it's magically sealed, refusing to budge. As the portal finishes forming, his classmates begin disappearing, vanishing one by one like they're being Thanos snapped out of existence. Desperate, Haruka scrambles into the ceiling vents, thinking he's outsmarted the system. But nope, the summoning circle isn't done with him yet. It follows him into the vents, and just like that, he's sucked into the portal anyway. After a less than epic arrival in the new world and getting stuck with leftover abilities, Haruka is dumped in the middle of a dense forest, with zero survival skills to speak of. Luckily, a pouch appears on the ground, a part of his newfound Minecraft villager skill. The pouch holds an infinite inventory, already stocked with beginner gear. At least he won't die in the first 10 minutes. Gearing up, Haruka checks his stats, only to discover he has to roll for them with a pair of gambling dice. Resigned to his fate, he rolls the dice and ends up with the letter M. Confused but too tired to care, he throws all his M points into his luck stat, maxing it out. Useful? Not really. Better than nothing? Absolutely. As he sifts through his skills, he realizes two things. First, thanks to his stellar track record as a loner, he's cursed with the inability to form a party. Ever. Second, to make up for that, he now has a unique ability that forces monsters to serve him. With his classmates nowhere to be found, Haruka briefly wonders why they didn't land in the same spot. But then again, he didn't care about them before, so why start now? His attention shifts to surviving in the forest, though he's painfully aware that any run-in with a monster will probably end in disaster. Then, he remembers his contact lens skill. Slipping them on, his vision floods with useful data, like a real-life HUD. The lenses come with an appraisal feature, so he can now easily spot edible mushrooms without accidentally poisoning himself. He fills his villager pouch with supplies and heads to a nearby river to stock up on water. While exploring, Haruka stumbles upon a small cave. Intrigued, he cautiously steps inside, mentally preparing for a jump scare monster encounter. To his relief, the cave is empty and surprisingly roomy, perfect for a makeshift camp. He pulls out a tent and a magic lantern from his pouch, transforming the cave into a cozy base. A little temperature control magic later, and he's got a fire going. Bonus, using the magic unlocks new fire-related abilities, and his cautious nature unlocks some handy detection skills. But despite all that, Haruka's only real weapon is still just a stick. If he wants to make it out here, he'll need to find a way to level up his combat game fast. The next morning, Haruka wakes up with a jolt, nerves practically buzzing as he scrambles out of his tent. To his relief, it seems he survived the night without any monster drama thanks to the anti-monster magic properties of his surprisingly useful skill items. However, being safe from harm doesn't exactly mean he's safe from hunger. So, he pulls out a frying pan and cooks up some mushrooms he gathered yesterday. You might be wondering where he got a frying pan. It was just chilling in his villager bag, alongside a full set of kitchen knives and some beef jerky. So far, that bag has been the MVP of his new life, leaving Haruka to wonder just what kind of villager stocked it up before he arrived. Having downed his mushroom breakfast, he knows he needs a game plan. After a stroll outside to gather his thoughts, he decides that the cave will serve as a solid base of operations. Still, he needs to figure out a reliable food source and some safety measures against any pesky monsters that might take a liking to him. Luckily, his contact lenses make finding food easy, and he quickly gathers more mushrooms and herbs. But the monster problem, that still needs addressing. Just then, Ara's detection skill kicks in, alerting him to some commotion nearby. Curious, he heads over and is horrified to discover a pair of goblins causing the ruckus. One goblin would be bad enough, but two with strength stats higher than his own. He briefly contemplates running away but realizes that living in this forest means he's eventually going to have to deal with them if he wants to survive. So, he decides to take the plunge while he still has the element of surprise. That said, he's not convinced his stick will do the job alone, so he wraps it in some of his magical trash and gives it a whirl. To his surprise, it works better than expected. With a burst of confidence, he lunges from the bushes and strikes one goblin on the head. The little green creature is dazed, but Haruka doesn't stop there. He unleashes a flurry of strikes until the goblin finally drops. That's one down, but the other goblin isn't going down without a fight. As the second goblin charges, Haruka dodges its attack with newfound agility. Now that he's got a handle on its moves, he easily evades and counters, landing a well-timed smack before hitting it with a wave of magic. Victory tastes sweet. Having just won his first fight against goblins, he figures that's enough excitement for the day and heads back to the cave to rest. Once there, he roasts some mushrooms for dinner and examines the club he looted from the goblin corpse. It has high damage potential but is heavy and has a short range. For now, he decides to stick with his trusty stick. When he checks his stats, he's pleasantly surprised to see he leveled up from the fight, and all his stats have doubled as a result. The next morning, he rises for breakfast as usual, but he's starting to feel a bit tired of the mushroom diet. He yearns for meat, but hunting is on the horizon, and he knows he needs to boost his skills first. The first skill he wants to try is the magic fusion ability he acquired. In simple terms, it covers his body in magic, boosting his physical and magical defenses and significantly increasing his strength. This should make him a fighting machine. His appraisal skill has also upgraded to level 2, so he checks to see what's changed. To his frustration, all he finds are question marks next to the descriptions. It's like the game designers just threw in a mystery mechanic for fun. With that distraction out of the way, he heads outside for some magic training. On his way out, he spots something on the ground and picks it up, hoping it might be meat. Surprise, surprise, it's just another mushroom. Delusional optimism aside, Haruka realizes he won't be finding any meat lying around, so he pushes ahead with his training. Activating his mana infusion, he takes a step forward, only to be launched several meters ahead thanks to his newfound physical boost. His body feels lighter than air, and with little effort, he zips around the forest like he's on a magic carpet ride. Plus, his dexterity is through the roof, allowing him to strike with pinpoint precision. Feeling bold, he challenges two random goblins and, unlike yesterday, he knocks one out with a single hit. Confidence surging, he thinks he can take on even more goblins. But when he spots a trio of them, his bravado wavers. Deciding discretion is the better part of valor, he backs away slowly before he can get jumped. After a solid training session, he heads back to his cave to refine his magic. Apparently, he can make coffee tables with his magic now. Eventually, he reaches a point where he can one-shot a goblin and even create a proper table. Inspired, he uses his crafting magic to make a gate for his cave, allowing him to venture out at night. Finally feeling ready to hunt, he goes after a rabbit, having not tasted meat in ages. Just as he's about to cook it up, he spots something else nearby. At first, he thinks it's a goblin, but upon closer inspection, he realizes it's something even worse, his classmates from back home. No thanks, he thinks. Not dealing with them today. He tries to sneak away in the opposite direction, but soon realizes that the popular girls, the gym bros, and even the nerds are also around. The nerds aren't so bad. He used to hang out with them in school. but he's still not in the mood for social interaction. Finally, he spots the student council group, with the class rep among them. Despite his general aversion to his classmates, he can't deny that the class rep has always been nice to him. For a moment, he considers revealing himself and saying hello, but then he remembers how much he cherishes this newfound solitude. There are no idle chatter, no taxes, and no annoying classmates. He decides to officially ignore them and stick to his plan of conquering this world all by himself. Haruka dives into a bush, heart-pounding, as a gang of delinquents approaches. One of them, clearly convinced he heard something, moves in for a closer look. Haruka holds his breath, but when the guy checks inside, all he finds is a bunny, and they move along. Crisis averted. Relieved, but now curious, Haruka trails after them, hoping to pick up some valuable intel. Instead, he's treated to the intellectual masterpiece of a conversation about the class VP. Haruka rolls his eyes. He thought he'd at least learn something useful. He's a little worried about what the delinquents might do with no rules holding them back, but he figures the class rep will step in as always. Just as he's ready to call it a bust, Haruka overhears something more concerning. The delinquents are planning to use a mere call to summon Tanaka and his abilities, allowing them to do whatever they please. Haruka knows they're up to no good, but social interaction? Yeah, hard pass. So, he retreats to his cave to grill some mushrooms, only to be greeted with soul-crushing news. His loner skill leveled up. Even his status board has acknowledged his hermit lifestyle. Sure, it's probably because he's been avoiding everyone, but still ouch. He shrugs it off. It's not like it's the worst thing ever. Honestly, leveling up might be a good thing, given that he's still stuck at a measly level 3. The problem is his two deadweight skills, Jack of all trades and Dummy. He figures Jack of all trades means he'll be good at a little bit of everything, but never a master. Pretty straightforward. As for Dummy, he's got no clue, though he's half convinced it involves puppets. After a solid round of overthinking, he gives up and digs into his mushroom dinner, though he'd kill for some actual meat. Exhausted, he decides to call it a night. Just as he's about to drift off, a loud commotion erupts outside. Haruka tries to ignore it. He really does, but curiosity gets the better of him, and he drags himself up to check out the chaos. When Haruka emerged from his cave, he fully expected to see the usual delinquent shenanigans. But no plot twist, it's the nerd squad this time, tangling with a bunch of goblins. They're getting their butts kicked. For a second, Haruka thinks, maybe I should help, but then checks their stats. They're rocking level 16, while he's still stuck at a sad little level 3. Yeah, they'll be fine. Just as he's about to peace out, he spots two sneaky goblins closing in from behind. Great, now I gotta save their nerdy butts, he thinks. But then he remembers that one time they let him borrow their rare holographic Charizard card. That seals the deal. Haruka charges in, stick in hand, and with one heroic swing, he wipes out both goblins. The nerds are floored. Haruka, the hermit, out here saving the day. After an awkward reunion because socializing isn't exactly Haruka's strong suit, they all head back to his cave. The nerds are blown away by how cozy it is, especially considering it's a literal cave. Haruka shrugs it off, explaining he used some basic earth magic to upgrade the place. Still, they're impressed he managed it all by himself. After serving up some drinks, Haruka asks the big question. So, why are you nerds wandering the woods at night? Cue awkward silence. Finally, the truth spills out. They're on the run from the rest of the class. Apparently, after their class got ice-kai'd, chaos ensued. Some handled it better than others. The jocks were trying and failing to be useful. The popular girls were more annoyed than afraid. And the nerds? Well, they were thriving, finally living their best fantasy lives. Then came the goblins. Everyone else freaked out, but the nerds and the gym bros handled it like pros. Afterward, the class rep, who, shocker, actually has some common sense, organized everyone and set up camp by the river. The nerds taught them all how to survive. Everything was going smoothly. Until the popular girls hit them with a "nah" were not doing any work. This, of course, inspired the delinquents to follow suit, leaving the nerds and the class rep to handle everything. But wait, it gets worse. The nerds overheard the delinquents' plans to use some very creepy skills like puppeteer to turn the girls into their personal slaves once they leveled up. Naturally, the nerds tried to warn the class rep, but before they could act, the delinquents hit the required level and made their move. Luckily, the nerds ambushed them, sealed their skills, and saved the day. You'd think that would be the end of it, but no. The delinquents, being the sore losers they are, came back in the dead of night and burned the entire camp down. By the time the nerds returned, everything was destroyed. To top it off, the popular girls somehow blamed the nerds for antagonizing the delinquents. Fed up with the ungrateful crowd, the nerds packed their bags and left. Haruka, feeling a rare pang of empathy, decided to throw them a mushroom feast. He actually enjoyed the company for once, but the next morning, the nerds were off, heading downstream to start their adventuring careers. They invited Haruka to join them, but he turned them down, convinced his trash tier skills would only slow them down. Still, Haruka couldn't stop thinking about the class camp, especially since the class rep was the only other person he liked. So, he set out to check on things. Along the way, a kobold tried to take a bite out of him. After a brief struggle, Haruka came out on top, though slightly chewed up. When he arrived at the camp by nightfall, it was completely deserted. Using one of his tracking skills, Haruka followed the trail and, to his absolute dismay, ran into the last people he wanted to see, the popular girls. Naturally, he turned to book it, but then he heard something that stopped him cold. Please. Wait, what? The popular girls? Saying please? In all the years he'd known them, that word had never left their lips. Something must be seriously wrong. Against his better judgment, Haruka decided to hear them out. To his surprise, they weren't looking to yell at the nerds, they wanted to apologize. Apparently, they finally realized just how much the nerds had been doing for them and felt genuinely guilty. Haruka asked if they were truly ready to go the distance to make things right. The girls broke down crying, admitting they wouldn't last a day on their own in the woods. Desperate, they begged him to teach them how to survive. Haruka, completely caught off guard, agreed before he could stop himself. And bam, his subjugate skill activated, turning the girls into his loyal followers. Now, whenever he gets into a fight, they jump in like overenthusiastic bodyguards, even presenting him magic crystals like puppies waiting for praise. Haruka, not thrilled with his new entourage, tried to help when one of them got a small injury. He handed over a healing potion, only for her to use it on him instead. Seriously, it was getting ridiculous. To make matters worse, Haruka knew he was going to have to explain this whole situation to the class rep, if no, when he ran into her. And, of course, right on cue, the class rep happened to be walking through that very part of the woods. And that's a wrap for episode 2. Haruka's now got the popular girls as his loyal sidekicks. But how's he going to explain this to the class rep? After the class rep finally gets Haruka's attention, he promptly panics, realizing he's got zero clue what to say to her. Worse, he doesn't even know her name, despite sharing the same classroom since forever. The class rep, ever the kind soul, is stunned at his level of obliviousness. Just then, the rest of the girls roll up on cue, except for the popular squad, who lurk behind Haruka like they're all collectively sharing a single brain cell. The class rep suspects Haruka's somehow messed with their heads. Hothka would love to say he's innocent, but the truth is, he's totally guilty. His magic accidentally turned the girls into his personal entourage, and now he has no clue how to fix it. He tries to explain, but surprise, no one's buying it. Frustrated, he gives up and tries to make a quick exit, only for the class rep to yank him back while she checks on Shimazaki. A little shake later, Shimazaki is back to normal. Relieved, the rep lets her guard down, which Haruka misreads as his cue to escape. Wrong. She still wants answers about the whole accidental subjugation thing. While the girls are chatting, Haruka, now left alone by a tree, gets bored and decides to practice his magic. because what could go wrong? He tries to conjure up a basement for his house, but in classic Haruka fashion, he ends up burying himself up to his neck in the ground. Stuck and waiting, he's eventually found by the class rep, who is baffled at how he managed to get buried after she simply asked him to stay put. She digs him out, apologizing for doubting him earlier, since Shimazaki confirmed he was just trying to help. Haruka has zero recollection of ever volunteering to help, but since he's now being showered with thanks, he just rolls with it. Thinking his ordeal is finally over, Haruka tries to leave, only for the girls to protest. Apparently, he can't just abandon them in the wilderness. The class rep remembers Haruka casually mentioning he has a house, which is news to her. Haruka, ever nonchalant, says he built it in his spare time. The class rep is floored, since they've been struggling to string together a basic campsite. The other girls are equally impressed, whispering among themselves. The class rep asks how many people the house can hold, and Haruka estimates about 200, though some furniture rearranging might be necessary. With a tinge of jealousy but no better options, the class rep asks if they can crash at his place, seeing as they're effectively homeless. Haruka, internally panicking at the thought of hosting a house full of girls, eventually agrees. He leads them to his house, demonstrating his surprisingly excellent wilderness navigation skills. Turns out he's got a knack for finding his way around. When they arrive, the girls are blown away by the size and structure of Haruka's home. After roughing it for so long, having a roof over their heads is practically a miracle. As night falls, Haruka sets up a tent outside for himself, knowing he wouldn't survive a night sharing a house with all the girls. Just as he's about to call it a day, the class rep walks into his tent. She thanks him for everything, admitting she wouldn't have known what to do without his help. Things had been tough after the nerds and jocks left, and she'd felt responsible for keeping the girls together. Now, with food and shelter, morale has finally picked up. But even though the class rep is grateful, she feels like she's failed as a leader. Haruka, in a rare moment of wisdom, reassures her that she's being too hard on herself. She's kept everyone safe, and while they didn't face any monsters, it's not like they were ready for survival mode. Haruka reassures the class rep that the nerds were born for this while she's been winging it and doing a pretty good job. Though she feels better after his pep talk, she's still a bit envious of his accomplishments. After wishing him good night, she heads back to the house, leaving Haruka to process the day, struggling to sleep. The next morning, one of the girls shakes Haruka awake, announcing breakfast is ready. Still groggy, he asks for 5 more minutes, but the girl insists. Resigned, he asks what's for breakfast, expecting bland mushroom soup. To his surprise, it's fish. Overcome with excitement, he accidentally headbutts the girl in his joy. She's mildly injured, but Haruka is too ecstatic to notice finally something other than mushrooms. After the class rep sees Haruka's excitement over fish, she's bewildered, especially since he's been living by a river. It soon becomes clear why. Haruka, master of many things, is terrible at fishing. The girls catch fish daily, thanks to a trick they have. Curious, Haruka asks the class rep to show him their secret. One girl with lightning magic reveals her method. She zaps the water until the fish stop moving. Haruka, impressed, begs her to do it again. Though she's hesitant, she agrees he is helping them, after all. Just as she's about to unleash another lightning bolt, Haruka seals the lightning ball with his packing skill and tosses it into the river. Boom, fish caught. Plus, he now has lightning magic of his own, meaning he no longer needs Lightning Girl to help. The class rep, stunned, demands an explanation. Haruka casually mentions that his packing skill allows him to absorb elemental magic. It's a neat trick, but he doesn't think much of it. He sees his skill set as a collection of random, useless talents. While the other girls splash around in the river, Haruka sits with the class rep and asks about their game plan. She admits they're still figuring it out, but they want to catch up with the nerds by heading to the nearest village. The problem is they'll need to level up if they want to survive the forest. Reluctantly, Haruka offers to help them train. Soon, all the girls gather in the forest for Haruka's impromptu boot camp. He asks what their levels are, and they reveal they're all level 15 or higher. Haruka, at a measly level 7, immediately feels inadequate and doubts they need his help. To test their skills, he sets them up to fight level 6 kobolds. The girls, brimming with confidence, think this will be a cakewalk until the kobolds hand them their asses. It turns out the kobolds actually fight back, shocking the girls. With bruised egos, they retreat to regroup and plan a new strategy, which for some reason takes place in Haruka's magic tent. The tent expands to fit everyone, but Haruka wonders why they chose his space for the meeting. After some discussion, the girls head out again, determined to win. Haruka is glad they're motivated but remains skeptical about their chances. After they leave, Fish Girl approaches Haruka to apologize for her behavior. She confesses she was testing him to see if he'd take advantage of the situation, but now she realizes she was wrong. Haruka's given them food, shelter, and is helping them fight, so she feels she can trust him. She promises to wake him up with breakfast again tomorrow. Haruka, pleased with her newfound trust, awkwardly admits he still doesn't know her name, so he's going to call her Fish Girl. The next morning, Haruka happily accepts another fish from Fish Girl, but overhears the other girls discussing heading out to fight the kobolds again for revenge. Before they can leave, the class rep calls them back, reminding them they still need more training. She suggests they practice by fighting goblins first. The fight against the goblins, another disaster. Despite the loss, a few girls stubbornly believe they're ready for the kobolds, while others conveniently fall ill to avoid fighting. Haruka isn't optimistic, but prepares to jump in if things go south. To his surprise, the girls learn from their mistakes and manage to take down the kobolds through teamwork. The class rep congratulates them, and Haruka breathes a sigh of relief, thinking they won't need him anymore. Finally, he can return to his loner life. Not so fast. The class rep thanks him for agreeing to join them on their journey to the nearest village. Haruka knows he never agreed to this, but her insistence wears him down, and he reluctantly accepts. As the group packs to leave the forest, Haruka reminds them to stay on guard. They have no idea what might be lurking out there. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, one of the boys from class is running for his life. He makes the fatal mistake of looking back, trips on a rock, and is cornered by his pursuer. With no escape, he's strangled on the spot. Haruka's main goal right now is to keep the girls safe since the delinquents are bound to show up soon. His genius plan: get them out of the forest ASAP. But, of course, the universe has other ideas, and soon enough, he bumps into a giant orc. Instead of panicking, Haruka sees this as a teaching moment. He tells the girls to stand back and take notes as he shows them how it's done. With nothing but a stick, Haruka charges at the orc. The orc, thinking it's game over, swings its club down with the intention of turning him into a pancake. But surprise, Haruka's gone. Turns out, our boy's hiding behind a tree. The orc is way too slow to catch him, but Haruka knows he'll need a plan if he actually wants to win. He remembers the nerds saying physical attacks are a waste of time against orcs, so he pulls up his stat window to check for magic. Luckily, thanks to his hacking skill, he's got access to all the elements. Just as he's about to light things up, the orc finds his hiding spot and goes full tree smasher, forcing Haruka to dodge its swings. Finally, Haruka gets fed up with this game of hide and seek. He pops up behind the orc and gives it a good whack with his stick, knocking it out cold. Shockingly, the orc dies from this one hit, which isn't supposed to happen with physical attacks. The girls are less than impressed. They were expecting a full lesson, not a one-hit. Haruka apologizes, promising to use magic next time so they can actually learn something. Not long after, Haruka spots another orc minding its own business. This time, he whips up a fire spell and casually lobs it at the orc, which goes down without a fight. The girls are even more annoyed now. How are they supposed to learn self-defense when Haruka keeps wiping the floor with everything? Later that night, While everyone's enjoying a barbecue, Haruka is busy setting traps like a paranoid Boy Scout to make sure they don't get ambushed in their sleep. His tent, of course, is decked out with anti-enemy detection, so he's confident they'll be fine. As he's planning tomorrow's route, his perception skill suddenly starts pinging, alerting him to the presence of someone nearby. Investigating, he spots 4 figures emerging from the shadows. For a split second, he thinks the delinquents have arrived, but nope, it's just the gym bros. Class rep, meanwhile, notices Haruka chatting with the guys from a distance. Though they aren't looking for trouble, Haruka is still curious why they're even out here. Assuming they're after the girls, he's surprised when they say they were actually looking for him. Haruka believes them but remains puzzled about why they avoided the girls. The gym bros then drop a bombshell. They don't trust the girls because one of them probably has a skill more dangerous than charm or puppeteer, the infamous hijack skill. Haruka recalls hearing about it, and if neither the delinquents nor the nerds have it, that means one of the girls is keeping it under wraps. Sensing an opportunity to mess with the bros, Haruka jokes that he might be the one with the hijack skill. The gym bros barely bat an eye, knowing Haruka is too much of a lone wolf to pull something like that. Haruka finally admits he doesn't have the hijack skill, though he does possess a subjugate skill that can turn people into his pets, not that he's keen on using it. The gym bros shrug it off and head back into the woods to keep an eye on the delinquents, who are acting shady. Before leaving, they ask Haruka to apologize to the girls for ditching them earlier without so much as a "see ya." The next morning, the girls wake up bouncing with energy so much so that Haruka decides to peace out before he's completely drained. Just as he's slipping away, the class rep sneaks up, fidgeting nervously like she's about to drop a bombshell. And she's got the hijack skill. But plot twist, Haruka's known for ages, thanks to his handy appraisal ability. Class rep's jaw hits the floor. How could he have known? Only the nerds were supposed to be in the loop. When she asks why he never said anything, Haruka, in classic no big deal fashion, shrugs it off. She's shocked her hijack skill lets her steal abilities by, killing people. Haruka, unfazed, says he's not worried. The nerds knew about her skill and didn't freak out, so why should he? They trusted her not to go all serial killer, and so does he. Besides, there's no way she could actually kill anyone. Cue the tears. Class rep gets all emotional, touched by how much faith Haruka has in her. Haruka, finding it amusing, points out that she's been crying an awful lot lately. Her response? It's his fault for making her a sobbing mess in the first place. They continue trekking through the forest until Haruka calls for a break, casually pulling out juice to sell to the girls. Problem: nobody's packing any cash. On the road again, they're ahead of schedule, but won't make it to the village before dark, meaning it's another night under the stars. Haruka spots a river and gets a wild idea. He asks class rep to babysit while he scouts. She volunteers to join, but before she can argue, he's off like a shot. While running, Haruka activates his magic boost and weight magic, figuring he can finally crack the flying code. He leaps, soars, and immediately faceplants into the ground. So much for defying gravity. Limping back to camp, he explains to a very worried class rep that his experiment went a bit wrong. Class rep, furious at his stupidity, lectures him. As a peace offering, Haruka offers her some juice. She declines, but juice girl, she's back at it. The next day, despite losing a girl and running into a few orcs, the group escapes the forest. The girls are ecstatic, but Haruka stays wary. Out in the open, they're sitting ducks. After checking his stat window, Haruka discovers he's unlocked a new airwalk skill, probably compensation for his failed flight attempt. Naturally, he tests it out, floating above the ground. Class rep spots him and is understandably stunned. Haruka just casually explains he's scouting. From his vantage point, Haruka spots a group of villagers getting attacked by wolves. When he reports this, class rep insists they go help. Haruka's less eager. What if these villagers are actually bandits? But class rep, true to form, wants to help. even if it's dangerous. Knowing the girls are useless in combat, Haruka decides to handle it solo. But running isn't going to cut it, so he supercharges himself with magic, lightens his weight, and adds a wind spell to launch himself forward. Unfortunately, the spell also catches Class Rep, and she ends up clinging to his cape for dear life. As they approach the villagers, Class Rep begs him to stop, but there's a problem. Haruka forgot to figure out how to stop. They crash land, knocking Class Rep out cold, while instantly wiping out the wolves. The villagers, mouths agape, can't believe what just happened. The leader, Ofter, and his buddy Gayak thank Haruka for saving them, explaining they were hired by the Adventurers Guild to deal with the wolves, but got in over their heads. Their carriage is toast, so now they're stuck hauling everything back by hand. While they wait for the rest of the girls to catch up, Haruka shares some of his rare stamina restoring mushrooms with the adventurers, who are shocked he's so generous. When the girls finally arrive, they're thrilled to meet Ofter and his crew. Ofter offers to lead them to the nearby town of Amu, and they eagerly follow. Meanwhile, back in the forest, the delinquents have been on a serious XP grind, leveling up like crazy. Now feeling pretty confident, they're planning their revenge on the girls. But first, they need to unseal their skills, which means going after the nerds. And that's a wrap for episode 4. Don't forget to subscribe for the next part, you don't want to miss it.